Story 1. Fine, don't believe me, enjoy being downwind from the worst smell ever. This story takes place many years ago when I was in college. To pay the rent, I worked in a large warehouse that manufactured and sold hardware. I ended up working in my own department, kind of. I had a manager who was pretty cool and left me to handle my stuff. I was in charge of sorting, repairing, and building pallets to order. I also handled recycling metals if product was damaged or defective. It is this last job aspect that is key to this story. I had been working there about 2 years at this point. To recycle the metals, you would wait for a large bin to fill up, then pick the bin up with a forklift and tip it into a large recycling dumpster out back. It is important to note here that although the recycling dumpster looked like a regular garbage dumpster, there were signs all over it that said metals only. It was a warm spring day when I went out to dump the metals bin, and I noticed a strong smell emanating from the dumpster. It was very unique and unlike anything I had ever smelled. The process of tipping the metals bin and emptying it took a minute or two, and the smell became quite overpowering in that time. I told my boss about it later that day and tried to explain that it was definitely not a smell coming from the metals. My boss basically implied I was a wimp in much more R-rated terms and told me to deal with it. I only had to dump the metals bin once a week, so I did my best to cover my face with my shirt when I went out from then on. Fast forward a month or two when the smell was absolutely insane at this point, and was truly incomprehensible to me. I was used to it by then, so I wasn't gagging or anything, but man, that smell was wild. My dear reader, if you are still here, we have finally reached the MC of our story. It was a Friday afternoon and my boss's boss had asked me to take a stack of pallets and drive it out to his pickup truck, which he was going to park out back about 20 feet from the recycling dumpster. He and my boss were going to stand in the truck bed and adjust the stack of pallets and tie them down as I loaded them with the forklift. I decided it would be a good idea to open the lid of the recycling dumpster to see if they would finally appreciate what I had been complaining about for months. As luck would have it, just as I was moving the pallets outside, the smell started to blow right at them. Both bosses started cursing and saying things like, "Jesus Christ, what the hell is that?" I didn't say anything, but kept moving towards the truck slowly with my pallets. By the time I had the pallets up on the truck, they were starting to gag and dry heave. I just parked myself there for about a minute and trapped them behind the pallets, so they couldn't escape. They were begging for me to back the forks out, and I eventually obliged, but not before I loudly exclaimed, "I ducking told you guys it smells out here." They were both remorseful to me and promised to take care of it. The aftermath was that the dumpster was taken away on the following Monday and a fresh one was dropped off. It was about a month after that we finally learned what the smell was. Apparently, a trucker, not one of ours, had had the brilliant idea to buy about 10 pounds of frozen chicken from some random guy at a truck stop a few hours before he got to our warehouse. With no way to keep it cold, he said duck it and threw it in our recycling dumpster, thinking it was for garbage. So for one fateful spring, we were blessed with the odor of rotting chicken mixed in with our metal scraps. Good times. TLDR, trucker threw raw chicken in our recycling dumpster and didn't say anything. Boss didn't believe me when I told him about the smell, so I trapped him in rotting chicken wind. Guys, show support by subscribing to my channel. Promise it's free.
Story 2. Make you cry? Not sure if this counts here. But a creepy jerk asked me to, so I did. I, 23F at the time, now 32F, was at a conference in downtown Atlanta. Me and my colleagues were all 5 of us women of color, and members of a fancy research fellowship that gave us the privilege to be learning at this amazing conference. Conferences like these are basically educational vacations, anyway. We had flown halfway across the country from a rural area to this super fun city, and after a day of speaking engagements, we decided to go grab some drinks and snacks at one of the many bars in the nearby area. We found a table, each got a beer or cocktail, and were all chatting about what else we might do with our time in the city. Enter the creep. A guy, 35-ish comes up to our table right behind me to chat us up. I'm the smallest of the group, and he started by placing his hands on me and my friend's shoulders, and while he spoke his hand actually landed on my lower back. I internally cringed through it because 2015 was a different time and unfortunately I was slightly more tolerant of drunk men being creeps. For the moment. It was professional decorum, ig. He jovially asks what we are all doing here in Atlanta. Trying to chat up the table. This is where I should mention we are Native American, so not something you normally see in downtown Atlanta. Not dressed in tradish regalia or anything, but facial features and skin tone, maybe accents? Anyway, he seems harmless because he obviously can't separate the five of us and he only has his hand touching my lower back where only I can feel. Some of his friends, holding their beers, come over for this fun interaction. My colleague tells him we are all here for a conference and we are presenting research, we are going to be counselors and therapists someday. She's a mama bear and she yells over the cacophony, we're gonna be therapists. He hears that and says, oh therapists? So you know how to make people cry? They all laugh. I haven't said anything so far and he's been ducking rubbing my lower back. I cocked my head back looking into his eyes, yeah. Maybe someday. Cute AF. He says, try me, sweetheart. I look him in the eye, stone-faced, and say, tell me about your relationship with your father. Creep went stone solid. He dropped his leathery hand off my back. His eyes narrowed and flashed red. He takes a step back and turns around, slamming his fist on a table before leaving through the back door. My colleague says, WTF? That was mean. What? He asked me to. Edit, had the year wrong, it was 2015, not 2012. Wow, OP, good job, nailed it. More daily Reddit stories coming, subscribe now. Story 3. Entitled Neighbor Wants Copy of Grandma's Will. When my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, she opted for no treatment. She had watched her husband go through chemo, radiation, and surgery, and he was miserable the whole time. She didn't want that for herself. Her family supported her. Over the next year, she gifted items to family and friends, told us to write our names on the things we want, take what we wanted, etc. There were conditions. No, you can't have that, it's a family heirloom meant to go to Aunt and her kids, or to Dad and his kids. We all knew what those items were and who they were going to, so that was easily settled after she died. The house was inherited by my father, who very suddenly and unexpectedly passed away 2 weeks later. I inherited the house at that point. The next-door neighbor, we'll call him Todd, came over several times, upset that he and his kids, 21F, 19M, weren't invited to Grandma's funeral. There wasn't one, we were all too busy reeling from my father's death, weren't presented with a copy of the will, it only included family members, and he knew Grandma loved his kids like her own, she didn't. She complained about them coming over all the time, stealing her water to fill their pool, and she had to tell them to stop calling her Grandma. He wanted to know if I would allow his kids to go through the house to see if there was anything they'd like to take to remember her by. Okay, first, dude. My grandma died 4 weeks ago. And, dude, my dad died 2 weeks ago. I thought he was awfully rude, but I offered to let them go through the boxes I had packed that I was planning to donate, and he was offended. I mean, mortified. He said his daughter and son had their hearts set on some items that were family heirlooms, and I literally laughed at him. I explained they were family heirlooms and would be staying with me, and 2 of the items had already gone home with my brother. He said my kids were her family and she would have gifted those to them. They should have been included along with everyone else when everything was divided up. Keep in mind that none of us knew this guy or his kids other than the neighbors next door. They were never at any family gatherings that were held at her house, and the only time I ever heard her talk about them was when she was complaining about them. Especially when she caught them using both her hoses to fill up their pool and then came over complaining because she had put locks on the outdoor faucets. Luckily, Todd's house was in foreclosure and he moved away about a year later. I have more stories, but those will come later. Oh my God, this neighbor is on another level of entitlement. The delusions are overpowering. Story 4. My friend's aunt doesn't let her children have friends so she can have them all to herself. To preface this story happened about 4 years ago. I, 13F at the time, had a close friend, let's call her Hannah, 13F. Me and Hannah have been friends for 8 years now, and are basically sisters, as we have gone to school together since middle school. I am close friends with Hannah's family and have been for years and have never had any problems whatsoever. I find myself to be a pretty likable person, especially towards adults, as I am always respectful. Now when Hannah and I were freshmen in high school, she introduced me to her cousin, 12F, let's call her Jasmine. Jasmine was probably one of the sweetest and most respectful people I have ever met, and though this story is baffling, I still love her to death. Jasmine's mother, on the other hand, we'll get to her. So after meeting Jasmine and forming a great relationship with her over a few months, Hannah invites me to Jasmine's mom's house to celebrate Jasmine's birthday. It was nothing special, just me, Hannah, Jasmine, Jasmine's mom, we'll call her Kathy, and Jasmine's little brother, we'll call him James, coupled with a few random Dollar Tree decorations. I had never met Kathy before, but she seemed like a very spunky, down-to-earth woman. She let us celebrate and we had a great time. I thought all was well, as it had seemed to be at the time I left. That was until later that week. I, like 14 at the time, received a message from an unknown number expressing their disgust with me at how I disrespected her and was absolutely disgusting for my behavior. I obviously was confused on why a grown woman would say such horrible things to a child nonetheless. Come to find out it was Jasmine's mom absolutely unleashing on me. I asked what the problem was, as I had treated her with nothing but respect at the time we met, and she tells me, "You will never speak to me or my daughter ever again." Now I admit I should have brought this to my mother at the time, but as a child who thought I was grown, I texted back. I apologized, but spoke my piece. Now I understand that some people's family dynamic is different than mine at home, so I explained to her that if she had told me she was uncomfortable, I would have had no problem changing the way I interacted with her. Sounds reasonable, no? No. We end up fighting about how I was rude, which never happened. Hannah and Jasmine both reassured me, and I thought that was that. I was obviously upset that I wouldn't be able to see my friend again, but I was so angry at the time that I almost didn't want to see her. I later texted her on Instagram that I was sorry if I came off as rude. She sent back this strongly worded message basically repeating what her mom had said, which we later found out was written by her mother, and next thing I know I'm blocked. At the time I lived next door to Hannah, so I decided to walk to her house and show her the texts I had received. To say she was shocked was an understatement. Apparently, Kathy was known to ostracize her own children because she has been disowned from the rest of her family for being abusive to her own mother, and she wanted her kids all to herself. This was not the first time this had happened, and even Kathy's own brother was on my side. He adores me specifically for the reason that I am respectful. I haven't been in contact with Jasmine since then, and it truly breaks my heart that her mother is putting her through this. Hannah keeps in contact and gives me updates on them. A note to all parents out there. Don't have kids if all you're going to do is shelter them and keep them away from the outside world, because it really does hurt them and the people they care about. What's up everyone? If you like this video, hit the subscribe button now.